So recently I did a video talking about Sonic Prime, and in that video I talked a little bit about Amy and how she's treated in that show and how I'm not really a big fan of it. Particularly how Amy nowadays in a lot of modern Sonic media is treated as an equally capable character as anybody else, that she can fight and do everything that every other Sonic character can do. And I really don't like Amy being handled like that personally, and every time I talk about this, there's always a bunch of people disagreeing with me on this. And that's perfectly fine, you don't have to agree with me, but I think part of the reason people disagree with me is because I haven't done the best job in the world explaining exactly why I have an issue with this, and why I don't really think it's good for Amy's character, so I want to do that here, and I also want to go into, like, how I think Amy could be better handled as a character, both from a story perspective and a gameplay one. But before we get into that, let me just detail the situation here one more time. So a lot of times in most modern Sonic media, be it shows or comics or games or whatever, Amy is now often depicted as being basically part of the group, one of the main crew Sonic characters that basically is on par with everybody else. She can destroy robots just as well as anyone else, she can fight Eggman, in some cases she's even depicted as being super fast like Sonic and other characters. And I really don't like this, as it doesn't match at all with what Amy was originally intended to be as a character in the first place. It's very clear by various things that Amy was originally supposed to be just a normal person with no special abilities and no strengths like other Sonic characters have. You can very easily see this being demonstrated in games like Sonic R, for example, where Amy has to ride in a car because she's not as fast as the other characters, she can't keep up with them, so she needs a vehicle to put her on some kind of a relatively even playing field. Same with Sonic the Fighters, most of the other characters are just punching and kicking in that game, but Amy is just some girl, so she can't compete with the likes of Knuckles in a fight, so she needs a weapon to help her out. That was the whole reason behind giving Amy a hammer in the first place, to compensate for the fact that she is not as strong as other Sonic characters. But nowadays, that's not really how Amy and her hammer are treated. Now it just kind of seems like the hammer is just her weapon of choice. It's not there to make up for her lack of ability, it's just how she chooses to fight, and with it, she's just as strong as any other character. It is contradicting the whole reason she was given that hammer in the first place. Now, anytime I talk about this stuff, people always bring up, well, Amy has gotten stronger over time. Look at Sonic Adventure. She managed to beat Zero and do all this stuff. And then, in various future Sonic games, she's becoming more capable. She started off very weak, but then she got stronger. And I would be okay with that if we had Amy slowly get more capable and more powerful over time, within reason. But the problem is that's not what they do. They have Amy in Sonic Adventure 1 where she manages to beat Zero. She manages to beat a single Eggman robot and save a single family of birds. And the idea there is supposed to be that Amy is realizing that she can still be a hero in her own small way, despite the fact that she is not as strong as other Sonic characters, despite the fact that she doesn't have those kinds of abilities. When you're going through Amy's story in the cutscene, Zero is depicted as this big, scary threat that is way too much for her to handle. But if this was Sonic here, he would no doubt be able to take care of Zero like he was nothing more than a mini-boss. But it's at the end of Amy's story where she is forced to rise to the occasion and manage to beat this thing that was a big threat to her before. It's showing that Amy actually can do stuff on her own. She isn't just helpless and useless and just needs to rely on Sonic to do everything for her. But still, if you compare this to the type of stuff Sonic is doing, while Amy is taking down a single Eggman robot, Sonic is destroying the entire egg carrier and defeating Chaos and doing much bigger things. The point of Amy's story here is showing that while she might not be as strong as Sonic and might not be able to do the kinds of things he can do, she can still be a hero in some way. You don't have to be strong in order to be a hero. That was the theme of Amy's story in Sonic Adventure. But then they kind of did Amy dirty in Sonic Adventure 2, where after the events of Sonic Adventure, she's feeling more confident in herself, and now she wants to get involved in things and help out more, but Amy is just treated like a joke in that game, and no one is taking her seriously, which is kind of just a shitty thing to do to the character after the growth that she went through in Sonic Adventure 1, but they do still manage to use her well because of how she does help via helping Shadow realize that what he's doing is wrong. That is Amy's true strength as a character. It is her strength of character. The fact that she is very compassionate and kind and cares about everyone. That is the thing that makes Amy stand out as a character, and that enables her to do things that other characters can't do. If Amy in this game was treated the way that she is today, then she wouldn't be doing this. She would instead be helping everybody else get to the core of the arc, and not helping Shadow regain his memories. I mean, yeah, you could just write this a little bit differently so it could still happen under different circumstances, but then Amy is just doing the same thing that everybody else does, and then she has this conversation with Shadow. This is a way where Amy can contribute in a way that only she can. Everyone else can do all the action stuff to work towards getting to the arc's core. Amy is not needed to achieve that. She is much better utilized as a character for something like this. But then, after Sonic Adventure 2, we go to the next game, Sonic Heroes, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Amy is now super fast, she's able to go through loops and everything, she can take down armies of Eggman robots just as well as anybody else can, and she is able to defeat Eggman, which is like, where is all of this coming from? Like, this has not been something Amy has been able to do ever in any previous Sonic game, and with no explanation, she's now able to do it. This is not a slow, gradual build-up of the character making her stronger over time. This is just suddenly completely ignoring what the character was and changing her into something else, which I don't think is good. Oftentimes the arguments I see in favor of strong Amy is that, you know, she's gotten stronger over time by hanging out with Sonic and everything, and I'm like, where did that happen? I didn't see that. That didn't happen in any Sonic game. They just completely changed the character's power level with no explanation. And already I don't like that, but even then, they're not even consistent with it. It's not like, okay, Amy is stronger now, and that's how she's going to be, because then in Sonic 06, she's back to being slow and weak. She's the slowest character in the game, and she is by far the worst at combat. Most of the time, she needs to use, like, explosive boxes to kill enemies for her because she can't do it. So it's not like they ever actually were thinking about this stuff that much, of like, okay, we're gonna make Amy a more capable and powerful character over time. Like, they just didn't give a fuck, they were just doing whatever they needed to do for the gameplay to work. Which I don't love, but I at least understand that. But I think the better thing to do with Amy's character is something more true to what she's actually supposed to be. At the very least, if you want to make Amy into a stronger character, then please justify it, give a reason for it, explain it. Don't just act like this is how Amy has always been, because it's not. And even then, I think that if you are going to try to make Amy more capable, it has to be within limitations. Amy as a character should never be depicted as being as strong as Knuckles, and yet that is often exactly how she's shown. Sonic Prime does that, but also if we look at like the ending cutscene of Sonic Origins, we see Knuckles and Amy working together, smashing up Eggman robots and like breaking through this wall, and it's like, since when can Amy do any of this shit? Since when is she as strong as Knuckles, the character whose thing is that he's supposed to be super strong? Even if we are trying to go with this idea of Amy's been training or getting stronger over time or whatever, how do you go from being just a normal average person to super strong and super fast? That's not a thing you can just do. At the end of the day, there's no getting around the fact that originally as a character, Amy was just a normal person, and there's no way for me to buy that a normal person can somehow become almost as fast as Sonic and almost as strong as Knuckles. That's just ridiculous. But here's the thing, I don't just think that Amy should be a relatively weak character because that's how she originally was, and so the original vision is better than everything else. I mean, I do believe that to a degree you should respect what a character was originally intended to be, even if you are going to change and develop them over time. Still try to be true to that original idea while evolving it, But even aside from that, the reason that I don't like Amy being a strong action character is because I think that is a worse way to utilize her as a character. I think it's not as interesting. I think Amy is a better character that has potential for more interesting, better stories if she's not as strong as the other characters, because really, what does making Amy strong actually do for her character that's positive? It allows her to participate in action scenes, and that's pretty much it. I guess it makes it easier to justify why she would be hanging around with Sonic and crew all the time on their adventures, but I actually think that's kind of a shitty thing when you think about it, because it implies that the only way that you can hang out with Sonic is if you're also really strong and capable and able to do things. If you're just a normal person that can't destroy Eggman robots, then you can't hang out with Sonic. Like, that's kind of a really shitty idea, don't you think? I think having a normal character that's not able to do all these action things would be more beneficial and lead to a more rounded cast. As Amy is often depicted nowadays, she's just basically like everybody else, but she has a different personality. And this is a symptom of a lot of stuff that I see that kind of suffers from like this modern day kind of superhero-ish treatment to characters and powers and abilities in like action series, where everyone kind of just blurs together into this mush of nothing actually matters. By that I mean, a character's unique abilities and attributes and powers don't actually mean anything from a narrative perspective. Using the Avengers as an example, when you're watching the end of like Infinity War and Endgame, you have those big war scenes where everybody's just fighting all the time against this giant army of enemies, and nothing actually matters in that scene. It doesn't matter who's fighting, what their power level is, what their abilities are. Everybody's able to take out these faceless enemies without much issue, regardless of anything. From a narrative perspective, all of the characters are being utilized in the exact same way, which is that they're just fighting the bad guys, and how they actually do that really just boils down to how it's animated, you know, what actual ways they fight, how they attack enemies, what their powers are, and all that results in is shallow, kinda cool action stuff, which that's fine on its own, but it all kinda ends up blurring together into everybody's just fighting. And like I said, I think a lot of stuff suffers from this nowadays, where like you have like hero stuff where everyone has their unique abilities and powers, but basically everyone is at an exact even playing field with everybody else regardless of anything. It just makes all these different powers and abilities that all these characters have feel very shallow and pointless. It's just for the cool factor and nothing else. And Sonic has been suffering from this same problem lately because every character is basically treated the same. They can all do the same things, they just do it in different ways. But in Amy's case, she is especially negatively impacted by this because treating her like this is the exact opposite of what her character was supposed to be. Her not being like everybody else is what led to her story in Sonic Adventure 1, which is the best story her character has ever received. And that's another big reason I have an issue with treating Amy as an action character, because when her best story is about her managing to do something despite her weakness, then just making her as strong as everybody else undermines the whole point of that story. You don't have to be strong to be a hero, says the person who's now as strong as everybody else. I hope I managed to do a decent job there of explaining why I don't like Amy being treated this way. Turning Amy into an action character is literally taking away everything that makes her character unique. Additionally, I don't like how Sonic and Amy have interacted with each other in lots of recent Sonic media because, again, it's completely contradictory to how they used to be. Nowadays, Amy and Sonic are treated like they're good friends, very close together, and, you know, they really care about each other. And sure, there is definitely a degree of that in their relationship in all depictions, but if we look at how Sonic acted around Amy in older Sonic games, he clearly didn't like spending time with Amy very much. He didn't like being around her. She made him uncomfortable because of her aggressive advances toward him. Oftentimes, he would try to get away from Amy, or at the very best, he'd be like, "Oh god, here we go." Like, that's how Sonic reacted when he realized Amy was around. But nowadays, they're like really sentimental and really close, and like all aspects of Sonic being uncomfortable around Amy have been completely removed. And I assume this has been done because we don't want to depict the most prominent female character in Sonic as just obsessed with some boy, and I understand that. But that's what the character is, that's what she was, just like her strength level. Suddenly acting like Sonic and Amy are super close with no explanation as to how this change occurred just feels like we don't give a fuck about what the character actually is, we just want to make her what we want her to be. How about instead of just overwriting Sonic and Amy's relationship with something completely different, how about over time we have Sonic warming up a bit more to Amy, and then we can have this kind of relationship rather than just pretending like this is how it's always been. Again, I'm fine with making changes to characters, but if you're gonna do it in a way that actually respects what the character originally was. Don't just ignore it because you don't like it. So yeah, with all of that said, I really don't like Amy as a character in how she's treated in modern Sonic material. Basically everything about her character that made her Amy is kind of gone, minus a few small elements here and there, and superficial stuff like she hits things with a hammer. I mean, pretty much every Sonic character is like this these days. They're all fucked up and wrong, but I think Amy in particular has been the worst handled character in the whole Sonic series. She is really bad. And the reason that I'm so bothered by this is because I see in my head the potential that Amy has as a character. I think that if you did things a little bit differently and maybe respected Amy's original intended character a little bit more, then we could actually get to a similar place that we are at now, but in a way that isn't shitty. Instead of just making a different character and we call that Amy, how about we have the actual Amy grow to reach a point kind of like this? This is what I really think is the problem with Amy. By treating her like this, we are leaving such good potential for the character on the table. I see what Amy could really be if she was being handled properly, and I'm frustrated by the way she is treated, because they're fucking it up and missing out on great opportunities. So now I'm going to go into my own ideas of how I would handle Amy as a character if I was in charge. Let's start with talking about gameplay, because that's really where it all stems from, is how do we make Amy a playable character in a Sonic game? That's kind of the Amy dilemma. Originally, she was not created to be a playable character, and so she was not thought of with any sort of abilities in mind that would make her work as a playable character. And that was fine for spin-offs, where you could just kinda do whatever, but when you want to put her into a mainline Sonic game, we have a bit of an issue. Sonic gameplay requires that a character be able to go super fast and go through loops and all that, but Amy can't do those things, so how do we get around this? Well, looking at what Sonic Team did in the past, in Sonic Adventure, they actually decided to make a gameplay style for Amy that is pretty true to her character. She's slow, she's weaker than the other characters, she can't do the things that they can do, but that's not exactly the most fun gameplay in the world, so I don't really think that's the best choice. We could also just ignore her lack of abilities, like what Sonic Heroes does, but I think that's a really shitty thing to do for the character, so I don't like that either. I think as far as what Sonic Team has done, the best thing that they've come up with for Amy is Sonic Advance. The way that she plays in this game is pretty okay. She's slower than all the other characters in this game, but she is still able to go through loops and run at fast speed when the terrain speeds her up, as that is just necessary to make her playable in a Sonic game, but condolences have to be made sometimes. But they did a good job of incorporating aspects of Amy's character into her gameplay despite the fact that she can go through loops and stuff, because she is slower than the other characters. She can't roll, she can't spin dash, she can't jump into enemies. Amy functions as the hard mode in this game, and I think that makes a lot of sense for her character. It's more difficult for Amy to do these kinds of things than it is for the other characters, and that is reflected in her gameplay. I think that's really good. And Amy also does have some unique strengths that only she has that other characters don't, primarily the fact that she can hit springs with her hammer to increase the effect of them. That's a cool thing that only Amy can do, and I think that works well for her character, because technically Amy's not the one doing anything. She is taking advantage of springs. She is using tools to enhance her abilities. And I think that is the right track for Amy as a playable character. I think that's what you should do with her. That's the whole idea behind the hammer, after all. It's supposed to be a tool to make up for her lack of strength. Her car in Sonic R was supposed to be a tool to make up for her lack of speed. So what if we continued on this idea of giving Amy tools that help compensate for the abilities that she doesn't have? This is where I think we can build off of the kinds of ideas that they were going with in Sonic Advance and do something potentially even better. Something where we don't have to fudge things like Amy being able to run fast enough to go through loops and upside down and up walls and stuff. Perhaps there's a way where we can better justify these things within her character and it can all work out a little bit better. And again, it could lead to unique gameplay opportunities that only Amy could do. For a starting point, I guess I should say that a lot of people have asked me, what would my ideal Sonic game be like? And that's not what this video is going to be. That's something that I might talk about at some point in the future. I'm just going to be focusing on Amy here, but by doing that, I am also going to talk a little bit about what I think should be done with Sonic. For this, I'm just going to be focusing on how Amy would work in a 2D Sonic game, and as a base, we're going to use, classic Sonic momentum physics gameplay. Basically, think Sonic Mania is our starting point. So here's my ideas of what you could do with Amy as a playable character in a Sonic game, and I'm going to have some illustrations here to help better explain what I'm going for. I can't draw for shit, so they're going to look terrible, but they should get the job done. So first thing we need to address is, how is Amy going to go super fast? That is just required in order to be a playable character in a Sonic game. You could just say she's able to do it for gameplay purposes and it's not really part of her character, but I think we can do better than that. How about we give Amy some roller skates? We could make it so that she can pop skates out of the bottom of her shoes. How that actually works, who cares, it's some cartoon nonsense. But that's kind of how it can work. When she's moving at lower speeds, then she can run along on her own, but when she starts to go above her top speed, then she starts skating. That can kind of justify how she's able to gain so much speed from things like going downhill. This creates a decent little justification for how Amy is able to do this stuff, again, using tools to compensate for her lack of abilities. In fact, I think that a cool idea for Amy might be that she is actually slower than all the other characters, so slow that with her default max running speed, she actually cannot clear a loop. So Amy, the only way that she'd be able to go fast enough to clear loops and get up big slopes is to manipulate the physics. Kind of think like Sonic 1 style gameplay. Before they implemented the spin dash, you had to do everything manually. The spin dash added kind of a little bit of a cheat to the physics gameplay of Sonic. It gave you an instant speed button that would allow you to overcome your lack of ability to properly build and maintain speed. So Amy could be an opportunity to bring that kind of Sonic 1-esque gameplay back into the games. You could even still incorporate the idea of holding down, and that makes you gain even more speed via having her crouch while skating, and that would reduce air drag just like real skating, and thus she would gain more speed. So that can be a way to have Amy able to do traditional Sonic physics gameplay stuff, despite the fact that she, as a character, shouldn't be able to do that on her own. Now, let's talk about Amy's hammer and how we're going to incorporate that into her play, because one of the things that I think we need to do with 2D Sonic gameplay is we need to get away from the one-button simplicity of the original 2D Sonic games. I really like how the Sonic Advance games were expanding upon classic Sonic gameplay with more moves and more abilities and stuff like that. I want to push Sonic further in that kind of direction, so we're gonna give the characters more robust moveset with more things they can do. Of course, Amy is going to have her hammer that she can swing for an attack, but you can point in any of 8 directions and Amy will swing in that direction. This is important because the direction that you swing with Amy, depending on various contexts, would have different functions. For example, swinging down when you're on the ground would make Amy do her high jump that she has in a lot of Sonic games. And here's a little bit of a depiction of how you can combine these different things together. You can use Amy's skates to go down a hill, build up a bunch of speed, and then hammer jump, and then preserve all that speed into the jump to get a really high, really far jump to reach new areas. And when thinking about the hammer jump, I kind of came to a conclusion, because when you think about it, what Amy is doing with the hammer jump, which really doesn't make any sense from a physics perspective, but whatever, it's a video game, she is hitting the hammer on the ground with so much force that it is sending her upward, which really doesn't make any sense for her character either, because you would need to hit the ground with such an incredibly immense amount of force in order to do that, but whatever, it's cartoon shit, it's fine in this case. But it got me thinking, if Amy can hit the ground and launch herself upward, then why not be able to do that off of walls and ceilings as well? So Amy can hit her hammer against surfaces, and that will launch her in the opposite direction. That could be pretty cool. This could kind of be Amy's equivalent to the spin dash. It'll give her a giant burst of speed in one direction, but she can't just do it by herself. She needs terrain in order to enable her to do this. Again, here's a bit of a gameplay example of how this could work. You could go up a spring and then hit yourself against the left wall to launch yourself forward, and then transition all that speed into skating down a slope. So that kind of opens up some cool movement stuff, but I've yet to actually talk about using the hammer against enemies in the game, and this is going to be a very big thing. Hitting enemies with Amy's hammer will not kill them. This is again to depict the idea that Amy is not as strong as other characters. If we theoretically had this game and Knuckles was in it and he could punch, then no doubt he'd be able to punch an enemy and destroy it. But Amy should not be as strong as Knuckles, so she can't do the same thing with her hammer. On her own, Amy cannot kill enemies. All she can do when you hit them with a hammer is push them away. And stick with me here, I'm going somewhere with this. So one thing that you could do is you could have that Amy's momentum would transfer into the enemy when she hits them with a hammer, so the faster you're going when you hit the enemy, the further it will get launched back. And because you're transferring the momentum into them, this would bring Amy to a dead stop. Kind of think of it like pool or something like that. And the way that Amy would be able to kill enemies is by hitting them into surfaces, either walls, floors, or ceilings. So she can kill enemies, she can do it, but it's not as easy for her as it is for other characters. I think that's being fairly true to the character while also opening up some potentially cool gameplay opportunities. Because remember, Amy can swing her hammer in any of 8 directions, and that would mean that she'd be able to launch enemies in any of 8 directions when she hits them. And so this could result in stuff like this, where you can hit an enemy diagonally upward, and the hitboxes would be generous enough that this would be pretty easy to do. And the way I imagine it, the enemy would travel in an exact straight line, and then they would stop and float there for a second, kind of like stunned. And then after that second, they would fall down to the ground. And the reason enemies would float in the air briefly after you hit them with your hammer is because, remember, Amy can launch herself in the opposite direction when she hits stuff with her hammer in the air, and that would include enemies. So if you're picking up with where I'm going at this point, then you can see how that could lead to cool gameplay opportunities for stuff like this. You can launch an enemy up into the air, jump up after them, hit them downward, and then basically get a double jump effect. That could be pretty cool and open up lots of interesting platforming opportunities for Amy. Here's another example of how that would work with a diagonal hit and moving forward at the same time. And I think enemies, when they're being stunned, they would have no hitboxes, so you could just move right through them to make it easy to, like, jump through an enemy and then hit them back the way you came so you can keep moving in the same direction. So that, I think, is pretty neat, but I think maybe we could go even further with it. We can have it that when you hit an enemy into another enemy, then they can push that enemy even further away. They can transfer the momentum that they have into the next enemy and keep on pushing them further and further back as long as you have enemies to hit into. This could result in gameplay scenarios like this, where you have a Buzz Bomber up there and a Motobug there. You hit the Motobug into the Buzz Bomber, and that pushes the Buzz Bomber even further up in the air, and then you can jump off of both of them to reach a higher area. That's pretty cool, right? I think that's got some potential there for cool game design, maybe. You can create a whole bunch of optional routes that only characters like Amy or Tails can reach by either flying up there or doing cool stuff like this. But I'm not done yet. What if we gave Amy a projectile attack, and this projectile could have the same effect as hitting them with a hammer, so you could shoot a projectile at an enemy and hit them with it, and that will also push them back. And just like the hammer swings, Amy would be able to point this projectile in any of 8 directions. And I came to this idea because I was thinking about how to give Amy a cool, interesting moveset that would be appropriate for her, and I was thinking about, like, Sonic is very inspired by real-life physics-based games. Like, you know, pinball is a very big influence in Sonic in many ways. And so I was thinking about what other physics-based games could we go with that could maybe work well for Amy. Well, she has her hammer, and now we're hitting stuff around, kind of like pool, or maybe a bit like croquet, kind of. So sort of expanding on those ideas of a projectile that Amy can hit around with her hammer to launch at enemies, what if, like in pool, you could bounce this projectile off of other surfaces and it could ricochet off of them at different angles? This could then be used for scenarios like this, where say we have a door here that's locked and the only way to open that door is to kill this enemy that's in this area that you normally can't reach. Amy could use her projectile attack to hit that enemy, which would then launch them into the floor, killing them, and that would open the door as the door is being held closed by the enemy's existence because video games. Again, this could potentially lead to cool little almost like pool puzzles that you could do with Amy that could open up new routes that only she could take. And here's a platforming example of how you could incorporate this projectile attack, where you have an enemy where if you try to jump off them to get to this higher route, you're not going to be able to make it. They're too far away, so you can hit them with the projectile and push them forward, and now you'll be able to jump off of them to reach that higher area. Not to mention the fact that you could ricochet it off of different surfaces to hit the enemy at different angles to set them up in different positions that you could use to platform around in different ways. There's lots of potential for this, I think. And what would this projectile be that Amy is hitting with her hammer to launch it around? We gotta come up with something to justify this. Well, I mean, it's basically she's doing pool in 2D, right? So they could be pool balls that she's hitting around. But that kinda doesn't really make a whole lot of sense thematically for her character. What the hell does pool have to do with Amy? Wait a minute, no, that actually works perfectly. What if the projectile that Amy is hitting around is a magic 8-ball? Huh, there you go, incorporating a bit of Amy's magical interest into her gameplay character. How about that? Pretty clever, if I do say so myself. Other things you could potentially do with Amy's character is you could incorporate her car into her gameplay in some fashion. Anybody play Carol in Freedom Planet using her motorcycle? Amy could kind of maybe work like that. Her car could be an enhanced state that she can enter that, once again, she can use this car to compensate for things she normally cannot do. Maybe when you have the car, now Amy is much faster, and now she can just plow right through enemies, and, you know, her car has that ability where it can go over water, so maybe you could do that as well. Maybe Amy normally can't run on water at all, no matter how fast she's going, so she needs her car to be able to do that. You could even give it some fucking, like, springs in the bottom of it that she could use to make the car jump, and then you could even give her the ability to jump out of the car, so you could make the car jump and then jump out of the car for a super-duper high jump. There's lots of potential stuff you could do with Amy's car, turning that into some kind of power-up or whatever. And you know what? I even thought about how Amy would be able to manifest her car whenever she needs it. I mean, we could just go with whatever, who cares, it's a video game, like that's what she does with her hammer, obviously. But then I was thinking, well, okay, so we have this weak character that's not able to do what the other characters can do, so they use tools and gadgets to kind of compensate for that weakness. And we're gonna have this character just suddenly, spontaneously making a vehicle appear. Huh, is anyone here familiar with Dragon Ball, a series that Sonic has taken much inspiration from in the past? Well, Bulma does that exact kind of thing using capsules, so maybe we could take some more inspiration from Dragon Ball for Sonic and do something like that. Amy could, like, carry around a satchel full of some kind of capsule-type thing that she could have a bunch of different gadgets and tools that she could use. Even beyond her car, you could come up with all kinds of stuff that she could do for gameplay. And would you look at that, the Sonic series already kind of has something that fits that bill. There are these things. I don't even really know what these are, but they replaced the monitors when we went to the 3D games, and they're kind of like capsules. We could have like little miniaturized versions of these that Amy could carry around, and when you break it open, you get the thing that's inside, just like how they work in the games. See, it's not that hard to come up with narrative justifications for a way to become more capable and stronger while still respecting what the character is supposed to be. And this isn't even a fully fleshed out idea of what Amy could potentially be in gameplay. I just came up with this stuff last week as I was thinking about it. I'm sure if I put more thought into this, I could probably come up with even more ideas of how you could make Amy really fun and cool in gameplay, yet still a way that kind of respects her character. That is how I think Amy could work in a gameplay sense that could potentially be pretty cool, but also we have to talk about Amy as a character and how she would be implemented into the story. And to do that, I came up with a bit of an Amy story that could potentially be her story in a Sonic game or something like that. A story I think could work as a transition for Amy's character from a helpless girl that can't do anything to someone that actually is capable and can hang out with Sonic and can help out in the action stuff in a way where we don't just ignore what Amy was before, where we actually have her grow into that. This is basically going to be like one of my story videos for Sonic, but for something that doesn't exist, so buckle up, this should be pretty interesting. At least I hope so. So first of all, for this story, I'm going to just remove everything after Sonic Adventure 1, as I think Amy's character went in a bad direction at that point, and I think Adventure 1 set her up in a good way that you could have developed it further, and they just didn't. So I want to try to realize some of that potential with this story. So after Sonic Adventure 1's events, Amy is feeling more confident in her abilities. And we could say that in between games, she got all the stuff I talked about in the gameplay section. The skates, the magic 8-ball, all that stuff. After defeating Zero and helping the family of birds, she's feeling more confident in herself, she wants to help out more on Sonic's adventures, and so she's equipped herself with more tools to help her do even more things. That would kind of be the interim in-between games, and then the actual story would take place on Valentine's Day, and it would begin with Amy baking some chocolates that she is going to give to Sonic. She's about to leave her house with the chocolates to go find him and give them to him, and she's feeling a little bit nervous, and maybe she shakes her magic 8-ball and tries to get a prediction to see how well the day is going to go. And it can say that things are not going to go very well, and she's a little bit upset by that fortune, but she decides to dismiss it and go out anyway. And after not too long of looking for Sonic, she manages to find him, and he's already in the midst of duking it out with Eggman. Eggman's up to no good again. Theoretically, this could be a part of a larger Sonic story in like a big game or something, but I'm just focusing on the Amy story here. So Sonic and Eggman are fighting or whatever, and Amy shows up, and Amy tries to get involved. She's like, oh, here's my opportunity to show Sonic that I can do things now. So she interrupts when Sonic and Eggman are going at each other, and maybe Sonic was like about to deliver the finishing blow to Eggman or something, but Amy gets in the way and she ends up distracting him, and he's like, Amy, what the heck are you doing here? And then, they start bickering back and forth a little bit, and Eggman takes that opportunity to make his escape. And then Sonic is annoyed that Amy is bugging him again, and thanks to her, Eggman was able to get away, and Amy apologizes and says that she just wanted to help, and Sonic says that he appreciates that, but that he can handle Eggman on his own. Meanwhile, Amy is feeling a bit nervous, looking for an opportunity to give Sonic his chocolates, but before she can, Sonic says that he needs to get going and go after Eggman. At that moment, not too far away, Amy can see some Eggman robots that haven't noticed Sonic or Amy there yet, so they're just kind of chilling out, and Amy asks Sonic, what about those robots? Aren't you gonna save the animals trapped inside them? And Sonic says that he'd like to, but he really has to catch up to Eggman, and then Amy's like, wait, you're just gonna leave them trapped inside like that? And Sonic can say that he's not happy about it either, but it's ultimately for the best. Once he finds Eggman's base and takes it out, then that will destroy the master control, and that will release all of the animals from the robots. This is something that I'm adding because something I always found a little bit weird about the Sonic games is that thematically your objective really should be to destroy all the robots to free all the animals, but instead most of the time you run past a lot of them, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for Sonic. So adding something like this to justify that I think would be a good idea. And here's an opportunity where Amy's compassion as a character can come in, where she isn't happy with that idea. Yeah, eventually all these animals are going to be freed, but for now they have to continue suffering trapped inside those robots. And Sonic is like, I don't like it either, but it's the best way to handle things, and so he runs off after Eggman. And then Amy is left there feeling upset by the idea of all those animals being stuck for who knows how long. and thus she starts to destroy robots on her own, freeing all the animals trapped inside. From here, basically, Amy would be following after Sonic, cleaning up the robots that he doesn't get along the way. If we were to think about this as a game, maybe this could even be like Amy's gameplay thing, like instead of just completing the level and getting to the end, she has to destroy all the robots on the level or something like that. I don't know, I'm just spitballing ideas. Maybe that wouldn't actually be fun to do, but, you know, could potentially work if it was done well, maybe, I guess. Anyway, eventually Amy would catch up to Sonic, who once again is fighting with Eggman in, you know, what would be another Sonic boss fight or something, and Amy tries to get involved in this time, actually helping Sonic in the middle of the fight. And Sonic can be like, whoa, Amy, get out of here, this is dangerous, but she's like, it's okay, I can do this, and maybe she actually does manage to get a good hit on Eggman, and then, you know, he has to flee again, and Sonic is like, that was cool and all, Amy, but this is seriously dangerous stuff, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. And Amy can protest, she's like, no, I can do it, I'm not as weak as you think I am, please, let me help. And Sonic can apologize and say, I know you just want to tag along with me, Amy, but seriously, this isn't safe, just go home. And then he can run off, and Amy is starting to feel a little bit down after that interaction, but after Sonic Adventure, she's like, no, I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna make Sonic realize that I can do things too, and thus she continues to follow after Sonic, still destroying the Eggman robots that he doesn't get along the way, until once again, for the third time, she catches up to Sonic and Eggman fighting, and she tries to get involved again, but this time Eggman launches an attack that is going right for Amy. You know, in all the fighting and stuff, she's busy doing whatever, and she doesn't see this attack coming, and it's about to hit her and potentially do some serious damage, and Sonic is like, whoa, watch out, and he runs up and he takes the hit instead. And this could be a really big, powerful hit that, like, knocks Sonic on the floor, and he's like, Amy, get out of here, and then he, like, falls unconscious or whatever. And Eggman is laughing, thanking Amy for giving him that opportunity to land that hit on Sonic, and Amy is feeling a little bit intimidated at this point, as, you know, Eggman is being portrayed as, like, big and powerful over Sonic, who's been knocked out at this point. And Sonic could be captured by Eggman. He could put him in, you know, the capsules that he puts all the animals in, and then he skedaddles out of there with Sonic. And then Amy is left there alone thinking about what she's done. Because she was trying to get involved, Sonic has been captured by Eggman. Maybe Sonic was right. Maybe she was just tricking herself into thinking she was more capable than she actually is because she just wanted to impress Sonic. And because Sonic had to protect her from that hit during the fight, Sonic is now in trouble. And at her lowest point, Amy is thinking that there's nothing she can do. She can't possibly save Sonic. It's all over, but maybe she still has a little spark of that confidence in her, and she checks her magic 8-ball again, and once again, it says that things are not looking good. And maybe right then and there, Amy starts crying, feeling totally helpless once again. Now she really does feel like a useless little girl. But then, from all around her shows up all of the animals that Amy has been saving throughout the course of this adventure. They all gather around Amy, forming a circle around her, and they try to comfort her, telling her that that's not true, Amy, you can still do things, look at what you've done so far, you managed to save all of us. Because remember, originally in classic Sonic stuff, all those animals could talk, so I'm going with that. So all of the animals are encouraging Amy, telling her that she's already done so much and that she can do this if she believes in herself, and that kind of revitalizes Amy's confidence, and she decides to go after Eggman and try to save Sonic on her own. She thanks everyone for cheering her up and tells them all to head back home because things are gonna get really dangerous from here. And then she heads off to find Eggman, and eventually that would lead to her finding Eggman's base and making her way inside. And here's a cool thing I came up with. So why did Eggman capture Sonic? What's he up to? Well, he is working on another Robot Sonic. This is supposed to be his most powerful Robot Sonic that he's ever created. Better than Metal Sonic, Mecha Sonic, better than all of them. And that's because this specific Robot Sonic has a very particular power source. Because a thing in Sonic, of course, is that Eggman's robots are powered by animals, but it's only ever been the tiny little critter animals. But what if Eggman started to use the anthropomorphic animal characters to power his robots as well? Maybe this Robot Sonic is powered by Sonic himself. Maybe as a cool little nod, we can make this the Robot Sonic from Sonic Adventure. That would be neat. But anyway, Eggman shoves Sonic inside this Sonic robot, and then he's done it. He's won. He now has the most powerful robot he's ever created, and the only person that has any chance of defeating it is out of the picture, as he's the one being the power supply for this thing. So now the stakes are really high, as in order to save Sonic, she's going to have to defeat this super powerful robot Sonic all by herself. And Amy manages to make her way through Eggman's base and confront him and the Sonic robot here, where she's like, where's Sonic? And Eggman laughs and he's like, he's right here in front of you. And she sees the robot Sonic there and she's like, oh no, Sonic, are you in there? Please, you can hear me, can't you? And Eggman just laughs and says that there's no Sonic in there, he's just the battery. But you should make a good test run for this thing, so let's get to work. And this is theoretically where you could have the final boss fight against the robot Sonic. However, while you might win the boss fight in this theoretical game, story-wise, Amy would actually lose here. She would not be able to defeat this robot Sonic. Nobody could, not even Tails or Knuckles. This thing is just too powerful. And so it manages to knock Amy down and put her on the ropes, and then it's like closing in for the finishing blow, and Amy tries to reach out to Sonic inside the robot, saying like, Sonic, come on, I know you're in there. It's me, Amy. I know that you're stronger than just some stupid machine. And Eggman is just laughing at this, like, there's no way that's gonna work, girlie. It's not happening. Sonic is gone. But Amy continues to plead with Sonic that she knows he's in there, and she knows that he can break free from this robot. But actually, that doesn't work. She doesn't manage to break through to Sonic inside the robot. Eggman is still in control, and he's still about to finish Amy off. But right before he can, an alert starts to go off at Eggman's computer terminal, and a whole bunch of warnings are going off, and he's like, huh, what the heck is going on? And he looks, and he sees that there's a bunch of failures all throughout his facility, and he's like, what's happening? And he checks, like, the surveillance feeds, and we see the animals that Amy has been saving throughout the course of this adventure. They have all infiltrated Eggman's base as well, and they're trying to do something, chewing on wires and trying to mess with circuitry and stuff like that, and they're trying to take down Eggman's base from the inside, kind of. And we can have, like, birds flying out of the pipes, and they start surrounding Eggman and start pecking at him a bunch, and he's like, get away from me! And then some of them could, like, get inside the guts of the computer and just start tearing a bunch of stuff apart. And remember, as was established earlier in the story, if you destroy Eggman's mainframe computer thing at his base, then that disables all of his robots and frees the animals trapped inside, and that would also count for this Sonic robot here. And that causes it to deactivate, and then it opens up and Sonic plops out and he's like unconscious or whatever. And Amy's like, everyone, what are you guys doing here? This is dangerous. And one of them could say to her that that didn't stop Amy from coming to try to save Sonic. They didn't want to just sit on the sidelines anymore, they wanted to try to do what they could to help. You see what I'm going for here? Amy used to feel helpless, but then she's feeling more confident in herself and she tries to do things, and that inspires the animals, who have always been very helpless in Sonic, but then she inspires them to try to do things. And it's thanks to the fact that Amy was caring enough to free all of these animals, even though it technically wasn't necessary. That's the reason that she has this whole army of little critters helping her now. That's the reason she's able to save Sonic and defeat Eggman. She doesn't do it by smashing things with her hammer, she does it thanks to her strength of character. So all these animals are running amok in Eggman's base, messing up a whole bunch of stuff, and then Sonic starts to wake up, and he's like, Amy, what are you doing here? And then he starts to get his bearings and realize everything that's going on, and then he goes to confront Eggman, and Eggman's like, forget all this stuff, and then he pulls out, like, a big mech robot thing, and then Sonic is about to go fight this thing, but first he's like, hey Amy, I think I'm gonna need some help with this. You wanna give me a hand here? And then Amy's all excited, and then she joins in the fight, and together, Sonic and Amy manage to defeat Eggman. He runs off, and the day is saved. Then we can cut to the aftermath of everything. Eggman's base has been destroyed, all the animals have been freed, and Sonic and Amy are walking along in the forest or whatever. And Sonic apologizes to Amy for what he said to her before and thinking that she wasn't able to handle herself. She really proved him wrong, and he thanks her for saving him, and Amy says that it's thanks to everyone. Everyone pitched in a little bit and helped. And that's the theme of the story that we're going with here, expanding on Amy's story from Sonic Adventure 1, that even if you're not a super powerful, tough, cool guy, you can still try to do your part, and that will make a difference. And Sonic can respond that everybody definitely did do their part, but Amy was the real hero here. And, that could be a moment where Amy's looking at Sonic, hearing him say that, and it gets her heart all aflutter and stuff, and then she checks her magic 8-ball again, and this time it says that things are going to go really well, and then finally, at the end of the story, Amy gives her Valentine's Day chocolate to Sonic, and she's all nervous about how he's going to respond. But of course, he happily takes it, and he has a bite, and he says that it tastes great, and Amy is super happy about it. And then the two walk along together as we end the story. How about something like that? I think that could be pretty good. It justifies Amy's growth of strength as a character. It justifies why Sonic would not be as off-put by Amy anymore. Thus, he would be more willing to have her tag along for adventures. She can hang out with the crew a little bit more and get more involved in the stories. Rather than ignoring Amy's weakness as a character, we utilize that to tell this story that gives her a great arc where she can earn the ability to be a main action character that can do the kinds of things that we see her doing today, but in a way that's a little bit more true to what the character really is. This is why I have so much of an issue with how Amy is treated as a character, because it's just wasting so much potential she has for storytelling like that, which I think would be way better than what they do with her now. That said, even after this story, I think hypothetically an Amy after this point would still never really be at the same level as all the other characters. Like, to compare it to something like One Piece, if Sonic is going to be our Luffy, then Amy would be our Usopp. She is the weakest of the cast by far, but that doesn't mean she can't do anything, but she has to handle challenges and problems that are within her abilities. She's able to help out with the action stuff here and there on the sidelines in smaller ways, but her biggest contributions to things should be in stuff more focused on her character. That's how I think Amy would be best utilized as a character. I hope all of that does a better job of conveying how I feel about Amy than I've done in the past, and maybe some people will start to see what I'm saying when I talk about these kinds of things. Will Amy ever become anything like this? I can say with nearly 100% certainty, probably not. But oh well, I still enjoyed making this video and coming up with all those ideas for Amy. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe in the future I can do other videos like this for other characters. I don't know, let me know. Did you like this kind of thing? Would you like to see more of this? As a no-life loser that has spent way too much time thinking about Sonic the Hedgehog, I have tons and tons of more ideas of things like this, and I'm probably never going to do anything else with most of it, so this could be a way to get it out there. Anyway, that's enough for now. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.